So now that I've moved into my shop and I have some of my 3-point implements sitting on dollies, such as my carry-all, my ballast box, and my wood chipper, the one thing I've been really looking forward to is getting a dolly built for my backhoe. And that's today's project. So to build this dolly, I bought some heavy-duty casters. These 2 fixed ones to go up under the stabilizer arms on this end, and 2 swivel ones to go on the side that will support the bucket. First thing I need to do is get the measurement to figure the clearance I need for the dolly to scoot under there just low enough so that it can cantilever back onto the dolly. Oh, and one more point, I'm going to be making mine out of wood. Now, you may want to make yours out of metal, but the measurements that you'll take and the dimensions and geometry, whether it's wood or metal, will be the same. Before you start, the first thing I recommend you do is check your tire pressure in your rear tires to make sure they're at the factory recommended level. That way you'll make sure when you make your measurements that they are correct.
In fact, I did have to add some air to my rear tires before taking dolly measurements. The lowest point on the backhoe measures 8 inches from the floor, but I also checked the clearance of the boom pivot bushing, and fortunately it measures 9 inches from the floor. The width at the bottom of the backhoe is 25 inches. I decided to shoot for about 1 inch of clearance between the top of the dolly and the bottom of the backhoe. Since my casters are about 3 3/4 inches tall, I could use a 3-foot length of 4x6 pressure-treated lumber I had left over from another project, which would give me a height of 7 1/4 inches. Close enough. I'd still have 3/4 of an inch clearance. By the way, the smaller the clearance between the backhoe and the dolly, the sooner it starts to lift the support pins out of the subframe when leaning onto the dolly. Too much distance and the pins may not clear the subframe before the backhoe is fully resting on the dolly. You should experiment with your backhoe using blocks of wood to find that sweet spot, then build your dolly to that height. I'll show you how I did that shortly. Don't get hung up on the particular pieces of wood I chose, which is what I happen to have on hand. The important part is getting the dolly dimensions right for your backhoe. You can make your dolly out of whatever wood or metal you have on hand or can easily get. After cutting the 3-foot length of 4x6, I attached the casters 1 inch from the ends of the 4x6 using 4 3-inch long 5/16 galvanized lag bolts for each caster. If you're not using pressure-treated wood, then you could use zinc-plated lag bolts instead. After marking the bolt holes, I use a hammer and nail to make starter holes to keep me on target while drilling. Then I drill 1/4 inch holes for the bolts. With that done, it's time to figure out the correct length of the dolly. I place the piece with the casters under the backhoe area that will pivot onto the dolly and simulate the other end with 2 short blocks of 4x6, guessing where it should be. Then I make sure that the bucket is fully curled in and lower the backhoe boom until the curl linkage is low enough for me to see where the wood blocks need to be. That looks good. The curl linkage rests nicely on the blocks. Looks like 57 inches is the right length. Now I need to make sure my dolly height is correct. I start nudging the boom down until the weight of the backhoe is off the top holding pins so I can remove them. With the pins out, I put blocks of wood and shims under the front piece of the dolly for support during the test. Then slowly raise the boom to start pivoting the backhoe off the subframe. That worked nicely. Here's a look at what's happening at the support pins. Perfect. On with the build.
So based on my measurements, here's what I've decided to build. On this end, I'm making use of that another piece of that 4x6, a little bit narrower so that I know which end is which. Of course, this end has the swivel casters, the end that goes directly under the stabilizer arms is the longer one with the fixed casters, and a couple of 2x4s to connect it all together, and we'll see what happens.
The length of the swivel end is 29.5 inches. First, I put in one deck screw at the end of each 2x4 to temporarily hold it together until I get it squared up. Then I take a few minutes to grease the caster axles and swivels. By the way, each caster is rated for 300 pounds for a total capacity of 1,200 pounds. The backhoe weighs 850 pounds, which leaves a decent margin of capacity. Next, I attach the swivel casters inset from the 2x4s enough to allow them to swivel freely. Again, I use 4 3/8 long 5/16 galvanized lag bolts for each caster. Then I flip the dolly over and install two 6-inch 3/8 galvanized carriage bolts at both ends of the 2x4s. These carriage bolts happen to be left over from another project. Flip the dolly again and put on the washers, lock washers, and nuts.
Let's test this thing out. Now I'm going to put a shim under this side because if I get it wrong, I could put way too much weight on these two casters, because this backhoe could lift up the entire back end of this tractor, and which is way more than these casters can take. So this is a little insurance here. Till I get it balanced on there, then I can take the shim out. I'm going to make a block especially for that. All right, let's do this thing.
Yes, I do hear that squeal. It's probably the idler on the engine belt. I'll take care of that at the 400-hour maintenance, which I'm about to do. I make sure the support pins are clear of the subframe before cutting the engine off. Notice that I wiggle the loader joystick to relieve the hydraulic pressure on the tractor side.
Okay. We are free. Now I need to release the hydraulic pressure on the controls. All right.
Then I disconnect the hydraulic hoses, plugging the tractor hose back into the tractor hydraulic output connector. This is a critical step. If you forget to do this, the manual says you could blow your hydraulic pump. Likewise, I plug the backhoe hose into its own connector for storage.
There we go. I'll make a permanent wedge to go under there for that little task in the future. For now, that did just fine. Let's see if I can move this thing. looky there. This thing is heavy, by the way. There we go. 850 pounds. So I finally have a dolly for my backhoe, along with the dolly for my ballast box, and I've got my wood chipper sitting on one, and of course my carryall. So the main thing to get out of this video is the technique on taking the measurements to work with your backhoe. You may have a different backhoe, different size, requiring different heights, etc. and so forth. So the dimensions of my backhoe are not important unless you're wanting to build one for a BH77. So if you're planning to build a dolly for your backhoe, then I wish you the best of luck. If you have any questions about how I went about mine that maybe I did not cover in the video, please let me know in the comments. I'll get back with you as quick as I can. And hey, if you've enjoyed this video, please take time to give it a like, make a comment below, and please consider subscribing. I'm trying to grow the channel. And as always, thanks for watching.